Oh, that's right. That's right.
After him sandbagging me to wearing a tie, I don't know.
Exactly.
Okay, so everything's ready to go.
Okay, then I'd like to call the meeting of Committee of the Whole of the City of Colwood, July 6, 2020 meeting to order at 6:31 and acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. I'm going to do a roll call now. If you could just announce that you're here. Councillor Baxter,
Here.
Councillor Day,
I'm here.
Councillor Jansen,
Present.
Councillor Kobayashi,
Here.
myself, Mayor Martin,
Present.
and Gordy, you keep getting left off my list, but I need to hear from you.
I'm present.
Perfect. Moving on to approval of the agenda, we have the near-term, long-term agenda and Committee of the Whole agenda. Can I get a motion to receive the near and long-term agendas? No. I have 4 hands. And take Councillor Baxter. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing none. Any in opposition? Oops, hang on. I better lower some hands first. See if I can figure out how to do that. Done.
Hit the little hand sign at the bottom of the screen there, and there's a lower all hands option.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Any in opposition to receiving the near and long-term agendas? Okay, seeing none, look for a motion to approve the agenda of July 6, 2020 Committee of the Whole. From Councillor Kobayashi. Any discussion? Seeing none, any in opposition? Seeing none, that passes. And we adopt the minutes of the June 15th, 2020 Committee of the Whole. Can I get a mover on that? Councillor Jansen. Any discussion? Any in opposition? No,
Oh,
what do we got? What do we got here?
Sorry, I was trying to put my hand up to ask a question.
Go right ahead then, Councillor Day.
Thank you. On page 3 of 5 of the minutes, there are, well, actually 3 motions. One was not voted on due to an amending motion. And then there are 2 motions. The first one moved by Councillor Baxter and it sort of looks scary, but it says that it was carried. It's to reduce the speed limits, but then it says from 30 to 40. And it says that it was carried. And then maybe, yeah, I'm very confused.
Yes, I actually got that. I might ask Amanda to chirp in because I think those were caught and probably corrected on everybody else's who didn't get a paper copy. Amanda, can you advise what happened there?
Yes, so they've been updated. So the amending motion, we were moved to reduce, and it says that the posted speed limit of the local roads and cul-de-sacs within the Royal Bay Latoria Southlands be 40 kilometers per hour.
Okay.
And then the motion, the main motion as amended was moved by Councillor Baxter, not Councillor Jansen.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. It just didn't make sense to me.
You're very correct on that, Councillor Day. So I think that is the official set of minutes that are floating around because we got our paper copies early. That's why we're confused. So I think I can still accept a motion to accept the minutes from Councillor Logan. Any in opposition? Right, sorry, any discussion before we go to that? Anybody in opposition? Seeing none, I'll prove that as passed. Public participation is next, and before we ask, we have members of the public standing by. I just got a few things to say here. Prior to the meeting, written submissions were received regarding Meadow Park and sidewalk and speed calming on Milburn and Lagoon Road. They have been attached to the agenda and circulated to council for consideration. 3 people have registered to speak during public participation. When speaking, please note that comments pertaining to a matter that has been the subject of a public hearing are prohibited where the bylaws have not been presented for adoption. The following items have been subject to a public hearing. Retail cannabis, 210-310 Whale Road, Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151/1989, Amendment number 172, Cannabis Retail, Bylaw number 1816/2020, as well as rezoning 85 Belmont Road, Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151/1989, Amendment number 171, CD 27 Belmont and Jerome, Bylaw number 1807/2020. Now I'm going to ask Amanda to bring the 3 callers on one at a time.
All right. So our first caller tonight is, we're going to identify you as 0569. Please state your name and address for the record.
Bylaw number 87. Now I'm going to ask Amanda to bring the 3 callers on one at a time.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So we're ready for you. Please go ahead
Perfect.
and state your name and address, please.
Okay. My name is Kat McMicken, and I live at 319 Willett Street in Royal Bay.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff, for the opportunity to speak this evening on behalf of the Royal Bay Community Association in support of the Meadow Green Park improvements. We have carefully looked over the proposed improvements for Meadow Park Green, and we all agree that this is a welcome addition. We would love to see the option of 2 stalls over the one, as this would limit potential lineups. The addition of the upgraded electric charging stations are a welcome and encouraging sight, as most people seem to be moving towards a more green, eco-friendly, and sustainable life. Meadow Park Green is such a highly anticipated extension of the community, and we are all very excited about all the amazing events and community gatherings that we will be able to have post-COVID-19, of course, safety first. We are excited that council and staff are taking an interest in ensuring that this is a safe, fun, and enjoyable place for all. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and we hope that you all have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Kat. Next one, please, Amanda.
Okay. So the next person we have is just joining. Hi, Andrew. Please state your full name and address for the record when you're ready. Are you there, Andrew?
Hi there, my name is Andrew Pommier. I live at 732 Heaslip Place in Colwood. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight, Mayor and Council. I appreciate your time very much. Just curious to add a little bit of insight around the power supply requirements for the park in Royal Bay, where you're looking at potentially hosting food trucks. I am a food truck operator. We run Indecent Risotto and have successfully been operating for the last 4 years. I know there's some questions going around about what power supplies might possibly be needed. Unfortunately, there is no standard when it comes to food trucks being built as to what their power supplies are. In past experience in dealing with large festivals and other events, we have noted that almost all of the trucks can get by on 15 or 20 amp power, basically a 115 volt, basically a heavy extension cord. The one thing I wanted to add to that would be that each one of those circuits would need individual circuits on them. So for example, you couldn't have a quad set of plugs all running off one circuit unless you had the amps to cover it. For example, on my truck, we have the ability to run off of 15 or 20 amp power, which, like I said, is 115 volt. I can run off 30 amp power, either at 125 or 250. And then I can also run off 50 amp at 125 or 250 volt. That's just on my truck. So I think to help kind of streamline things, if you are looking at putting in power supply for trucks, that we take a look at just making it the basic minimum. Like I said, the 15 or 20 amp, 115 or 110 or 115 volt power supplies, each individually on a circuit breaker. And then from there, the trucks can pull power and adapt it up or down as they need it. The one benefit that we've always found in any of the events that we have done in the past is having that power supply eliminates the need for trucks to run on generators. Although most of the trucks in existence run on very quiet inverter generators, it's not usually a big issue for sound. Some of them don't necessarily have access to that. And the ability for trucks to be able to plug and play, basically pull up, plug in, and start running, really streamlines the events and prevents that extra noise pollution from running the generators. It also prevents the burning of the fuel on site to power those generators as well. I know that that's a big consideration for a lot of event planners and organizers. Even in today's current situation where we're having much smaller groups, it is so much nicer to have an event where you don't hear the hum of generators in the background. The other thing that that was really interesting around all of this was just the thoughts of, and this is a question going out to you, in the park in Royal Bay, who would actually be organizing the events and the gathering of information, getting trucks together and all of those kinds of things?
I'm going to suggest that would vary depending on the event, but most likely the city of Colwood would be involved, if not leading at the parade, at least involved assisting with it.
Fantastic, fantastic. So touching on that, I know that we're in the middle of going through a trial down at the lagoon as well. We're very happy to be involved in that. There have been some challenges around scheduling of trucks and balancing the schedules. Some trucks seems to be getting a lot more shifts, some getting a lot less. Just moving forward, is there going to be the ability to have open dialogue around what's happening at the lagoon and what will be happening in the future at Royal Bay, involving all the stakeholders?
Absolutely, there's that opportunity.
Okay, currently that's not really happening. We are being directed. Any input that's being generated is, I don't feel is being listened to on a regular basis. I know there's a Facebook group started up, including the city of Colwood and all the food truck vendors. Unfortunately, no information is being passed on there. Decisions are being made, and then we're just being told what the decisions are. So I'm not feeling that we're getting that opportunity to have that. Is there anything we can do to rectify that situation?
Well, I think you always have access to council and staff at Colwood if you.
Okay.
I'd suggest contacting the mayor and telling him your concerns.
I certainly appreciate that. If there is any additional input that is required around what is happening with the park in Royal Bay, and you're looking to just get some further feedback or information, I would certainly love to volunteer my time for that. I think having food trucks in local communities really helps to kind of stimulate the economy. It creates a sense of community. It allows, especially in Royal Bay right now, as there aren't any services available, such as dining or retail or any of those kinds of things. I am aware that that is coming, but as an interim measure, we can start creating that sense of community there. And absolutely, ourselves and many of the food trucks that we work with would love to be able to help out in any way that we can.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
I know that our manager of engineering, Trevor Auger, was listening into this, and he may need to pick your brain a little bit on some of the technical power supply stuff you were telling him. So hopefully, if he feels necessary, he can track you down and get clarification.
Absolutely, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Amanda, I think we have one more public.
Yes, we do. Just a moment here. I'm going to admit them. Hi there. Oh, just waiting for the audio. Hi there. Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to stop the video. Can you please state your name and address for the record, please?
Hi, my name is Brad Windsor. I live at 221 Milburn Drive.
Okay, so please go ahead, Brad.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to address the council and everyone for taking the time to hear me out. This is in regards to sidewalks on Milburn Drive and Lagoon Road. Not the first time this has probably come up, but we wanted to readdress it. This is my first time addressing everyone, so I want to congratulate the council on being elected in 2018. Of the 12,931 registered voters, you enjoyed a 4,089 person turnout for voting. This is 31% of the electorate. Out of those 31%, 2,348 voted for our mayor who's sitting today. That is 57% of those who voted and 18% of the total registered vote. The reason I bring this up is not to disparage the numbers at all, actually that's a great turnout, but to compare them to a survey that took place in August 2018, 2 months prior to that election. The survey put out was for traffic calming measures on mitigation on Milburn and Lagoon. The council policy at the time was that there'd be a 50% response with a 75% approval rate. By those standards, this council and the mayor would not be sitting here today listening to me. The response to the survey was 42%, greater than the civic election percentage of turnout. And the approval rate was 60%, again, greater than what the mayor enjoyed to sit here today. The survey was done prior to this version of council sitting, so we're bringing forth a petition again to reconsider this, and I've attached it to my application to speak today. The 5 major indicators that went into sidewalk planning for Colwood leave out a very important factor, I believe, which is risk. Milburn and Lagoon both fill at least 3 of the 5 categories needed to put sidewalks in priority. Proximities to schools, as the streets merge and join at the east end of Sangster Elementary. Proximity to transit route, as both of them are on the Route 52 and lead to the Lagoon. And the last point was impact from traffic studies needing upgrades. The issue here is that in the survey that was done in 2018, the data that was collected showed 47% volume increase during commuting times on Milburn. This is when Ocean Boulevard is open, granted. The study showed some 15% of the traffic was going 50 kilometers an hour. The speed limit is 40, so I don't know why 50 was used as a benchmark. How many were going over 40? We don't know. The same study showed that 66% of the vehicles traveling on Lagoon were going in excess of 50, 66%. That alone, without consultation from the community, should have resulted in the need for sidewalks and speed mitigation on these 2 roads. Risk to the public was not considered in these 5 factors and should be. Milburn is a steep road that winds. Children travel up these roads to go to school, which is at the top of the hill. Traffic is so uncomfortable that they steer into oncoming lanes to avoid possible pedestrian collisions. Not only are sidewalks common sense here, but is now becoming a liability for the city, as we do know that there's increased traffic and speed along these roads in conjunction with their pitch and curves. Last week, a deer was hit, presumably because of speed. There's been a curb replaced at least 3 times at the top of Milburn and Lagoon, and it keeps getting hit. There's photographic evidence that after it's hit, skid marks veer into oncoming traffic. If we know these things and someone gets hit, how are we not liable? We put forth a petition and had 240 plus signatures within a week without any fanfare or marketing. I have attached the link to that petition in my request to speak today. We recognize the amount of signatures is possibly insignificant or not even relevant to a decision, but I wanted to bring to your attention as I don't believe that any other road will receive this amount of volume for a petition in such a short amount of time. On the city's website, it lists a few major attractions to Colwood, the Lagoon, Hatley Castle, the beach, as well as Fisgard Lighthouse. Visitors will be coming down this road no matter what, whether we open up Ocean or not. If we open up Ocean later, which is a whole separate issue, it will increase the risk, but it won't diminish it. We ask that the council immediately move to reprioritize these 2 roads for sidewalks in the sidewalk plan. We know that in any other issue, having 60% of the electorate agree on one thing is very rare. Lastly, I just want to say that we don't believe that our roads are more important than other roads, or that our people are more important than other people. There's just simply more risk here, and they lead to some of the main attractions in Colwood. That's all we're asking, and we're not asking for more money. We're simply asking for reprioritization of the sidewalk plan to include Millburn and Lagoon at the top. And that was it. No more money, just the common sense approach of having money that's already budgeted, put to where it's needed the most. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you for that presentation, Brad. We hear you. Amanda, I believe that's it for public participation.
Yes, that was the last one. Thank you.
Okay, moving on now to item 5.1. Kate Evans from Landmark Consultants, give us a presentation on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Kate, hopefully you're on there, or somebody going to introduce Kate?
I am here and available. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I'm just going to share my screen now, so give me a moment and I'll verify that that is all working properly. Okay, can everyone see the presentation fine?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So good evening, and thank you, Mayor, Chair, and Council for the opportunity to present an update on our Parks Colwood. So this is the process for the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So this evening, I will be sharing some brief highlights about the project and process status, and I'll be focusing on phase 1 engagement, which is currently underway. I'll also share a brief snapshot of some of the background work completed to help us understand Colwood Parks today, and I'll end off with a summary of the next steps and what you can look forward to as we progress through phase 2 and the remainder of the process. I'll welcome any questions you may have for me or staff, either no problem for me if you want to ask as I go, or I'll of course welcome anything that comes up at the end of the presentation.
Thank you.
So in a snapshot, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is a high-level planning document, and it's focused on the next 10 plus years. And so the summary points here are really the kind of key points that will sit within the document at the end of the day. So it'll establish a vision and goals as a framework, and also an understanding of existing conditions, opportunities, challenges, and relationship to some analysis and benchmarks that are a little bit more technical in nature. And the core of the document really will be the strategic priorities, recommendations, and actions that will be put forth as a part of this plan, and will chart out some tasks and jobs for Mayor and Council and staff to carry forward over the preceding years. And finally, the document will outline a parks classification system, as well as a form for the future park master plans, which will individual park master plans, I should say, and those will be key resources for continued planning for parks in the city. So what the overall process looks like in a timeline summary is 3 key phases. So phase 1 is where we are now in blue there, and we're focused on gathering ideas and laying the groundwork, completing our background studies and inventory and analysis. And then phase 2 is where we kind of get into the details of exploring options and arriving at phase 3, which is the kind of detailed development and summary, review, and refinement of the plan itself. So each of these 3 phases has an opportunity for and various components for public engagement, and I'll touch on the forms of engagement in the following slides. The last thing that I'll say at this kind of introductory process part is that in order to be successful, this process, like many, will need council's involvement to support getting the word out and encouraging people to take some time to provide feedback and to be involved in the process. So another way of looking at the process as represented here, and where the overall process looks more like a target. And we start out broadly on that outer ring and really try and gather information to understand the current system. And since this is the first Parks and Recreation master plan for the city of Colwood, as opposed to an update or a revisiting, this initial step really is particularly important for us to establish a firm foundation and a baseline to move forward. The first phase is also critical in terms of engagement, because Parks and Recreation are so closely connected to the community that ideally we want people to join us at the start of this process so they can continue to kind of grow and learn with us as we advance through looking at what the options are and refining the plan in order to kind of reach at the final version of it. So we become more focused with each step as we explore options and evaluate priorities and eventually arrive at a recommended plan. Our Parks Colwood is about making choices with the community, and so the engagement levels for this process will range between inform up to involve. And so this diagram that you're seeing here is a slight adaptation of the IAP2 public participation spectrum. So it's a standard that's used to reference both for municipalities as well as for the public to understand where on the spectrum a process may align. And so for this process, we're looking at the 3 areas in green, and we kind of evolve through these and touch on these 3 throughout the process. As we arrive more towards the end of the process, then we're trending back towards more inform and consult and less involved, because we're kind of narrowing in and we've taken in the broader involvements in the prior stages. So now that I've emphasized that engagement really is at the heart of this process, we of course had to think carefully about how to pivot this spring during COVID-19 restrictions and measures. And certainly our engagement process here has been tweaked, but the distinct silver lining for this process is that parks, with the exception of playgrounds, have been open and perhaps even more important to our communities through the first wave of COVID-19. And now as we're in phase 3 in British Columbia, playgrounds, et cetera, are also back on the agenda. So for this process, regardless of how we engage, our engagement aims and our engagement audiences remain the same. And so we've shifted, but not had to do any sort of more drastic or wholesale change. And so we've had slightly less emphasis on print tools, such as printed displays or things where we were specifically gathering people to discuss this process. And instead, we were able to shift more of an emphasis to still have those forms of communication and two-way conversation, but with more emphasis on digital tools. The Let's Talk Colwood platform is really the key kind of central conduit for the process, and is increasingly for the city in general, being familiar and referenced by the community as a go-to location for what's happening. And we recognize there still is certainly a role for print tools, and perhaps even more significant role for word of mouth and in making sure to use existing community connections and communications channels. So our audiences are diverse, and we still need to connect with them in diverse ways. So to do this, outreach is fundamental, and part of outreach is brand recognition. So it's really a bit like advertising. And hopefully you have each seen the Our Parks Colwood image that you see up on the screen here in at least one location over the past couple of weeks since the public launch of the process in phase 1. And our outreach and engagement approach is organized into 3 categories. So the first is digital tools. And really this is, COVID-19 aside, is really the most expansive kind of version of where it's the most flexible and convenient. And so fortunately, the city has also set up Let's Talk Colwood last year, which really does provide a good wealth of opportunities for productive online engagement that can be more two-way conversations, which can be difficult to achieve in other digital platforms. The city also has a well-developed, successful social media presence, and so this is an asset and something that we've integrated in the approach for this process. We have also added, as an adaptation, some extra features in order to kind of heighten the presence and awareness of the project, and so things including video shorts have been developed in order to try and bolster that presence and awareness in the community. But of course, not everyone interacts online. And so in a time of, where it's still wise to be physical distancing to the greatest extent possible, this means that we need to be thoughtful about how and where we use print media to still be able to collect input and reach people beyond the digital realm. And so there are a series of fun signs that are out and rotating through city parks, encouraging people to get involved and be aware of the process. So that's the Posts in Parks series. There are also posters out in accessible parts of the community, so places that are key community locations, grocery stores, et cetera, that are still open and being frequented. Including at the weekend branch drop-offs that the city facilitates. So that's a really good audience where people are waiting and able to see this information. We also produce project postcards for drop-off to some potentially harder to reach audiences, such as seniors residences and affordable housing. And there is also a paper copy of the survey that's been produced that's available upon request, as well as some fun things like stickers and buttons and giveaways that are being used along the way. So the last component, and maybe one of the most important, is people and word of mouth. So although our project team is small, there are expansive networks within Colwood and West Shore Parks and Recreation. And so we've reached out to community ambassadors and organizations, as well as reached out to local First Nations. And really the emphasis here for Mayor and Council is that you will be, and currently and always are, voices that are well connected in the community, and so are really play a key role in helping people to understand why their participation is important. Most often it is a friend or a neighbor, a direct connection that you trust that really inspires people to become involved. So we can't emphasize the role that anyone can play in kind of promoting this or letting people know why this is important and why they can contribute. So the first phase of engagement was launched in June, and this slide here is just a summary of the key items for this phase. The focal point really at this phase is the community questionnaire, which is launched and live on Let's Talk Colwood right now. And so there has been more than about 70 responses that have come in so far in the first weeks, and it will be open until July 16th. With the aim and hope that it will gain momentum and responses over the following 10 days. And the last item here is the only one that I haven't really touched on yet, and so that is the comparator interviews. And for this, we engaged 5 other communities, both neighboring communities and other comparable communities in British Columbia, to explore some key questions about their parks and recreation system and plans in order to inform Colwood's plan, especially since this is the first draft for the city. So as the final kind of part of my update here, I'll share some brief highlights from our background work and trends that we considered that helped us frame questions for input and clarification from the public. So we have drafted a classification system that organizes the existing parks in the city of Colwood into 7 categories, as they're shown here. And these are based on land use patterns, community needs, surrounding development, suitable uses, and the level of amenities or services that are provided. The next slide here is a little bit difficult maybe to interpret at this scale, but it identifies where the different classifications of park fall within the city. And it also highlights that it's not just the city of Colwood owned lands, but also regional sites, facilities, and school sites that all contribute to the parks and recreation system for the city. So there's an important dynamic where the city has more direct control, obviously, over the city parklands. But when we look at the system, we also consider it as a whole, because for residents and users, it's often exact ownership or boundaries don't really make a difference. It's about the full system. So just as a summary that's maybe a little bit more legible than the map version, this is just a list that kind of highlights where the existing parks fall in this draft system that we've developed. And in many cases, existing parks fit into more than one class. This is common and almost always the case. And in those cases, the park is placed in the most appropriate or the primary class. So an example there is that we have a waterfront park class for the city of Colwood, and this is because the waterfront really is so central to the identity of the city and people's image of the park system, and so it kind of stands alone. whereas something like Coburg Peninsula or Esquimalt Lagoon is slotted here under waterfront park, but it certainly serves the kind of functions that a community park does. But primarily it is a waterfront park, and so that's the category that it sits under. Of course, classification of parks are subject to change based on future planning and park development. The classification of a park is, their intention really isn't for it to be written in stone, but it's to aid and assist management processes and allow for some tracking and comparisons with progress within the city, and also for comparisons with standard metrics and other communities, which tend to have a similar framework for classification, but that it's there are always some slight adaptations to make it specific to the place. So the last point that I'll touch on from the background review is 5 key trends that we documented based on research as well as initial input from our comparator interviews with the neighboring and comparable communities. And so it's important for us to consider broader trends, but also to kind of come back to the community and check in on those trends specific to the city of Colwood. So we did our kind of background and initial work in order to frame up some questions through phase 1 engagement to help understand if these resonate for Colwood and are things that we should be paying attention to as we move forward with draft directions and recommendations, or if there are other things that seem more important or more suited to the specific circumstance for the city. So to close, just a short summary of the immediate next steps to be watching out for as we progress through the process. So we're going to be continuing with promotion and encourage any word of mouth or support you can lend to phase 1 engagement and the activities that are rolling for that. So the questionnaire will close on July 16th. And from there, we will compile and analyze the collective data from interviews and the questionnaire and other forms of input. And that summary and analysis will guide and give us some good reference points to start framing phase 2 options and draft directions towards the draft plan. And so phase 2 will be coming back and working towards the next phase of public engagement in September. So overall, I think for this process in the current climate, I think Parks and Recreation it's a really interesting time to be discussing with people, because I think for many, they've never really been more important to our community health than now, as other places were kind of restricted for some time. So I think it is really good fuel for people to be thinking about the role of Parks and Recreation for them and what they could see as potential gaps or places to put emphasis for improvement in the future. And we're excited to be launched in this process with community in Colwood to plan for Parks and Recreation over the next 10 years and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. I see the mayor has been waving his hand pretty hard, and I have a few other people to go. So Mayor Martin, go away, have a way.
Thank you. I didn't realize I was waving it hard, but
well, I apologize that I was apparently not seeing the hard waving.
So first of all, this probably is a question more to staff than it is to you, but thank you for the presentation. Is there a material difference between how we're classifying a park presently versus how we classify green space? Or I'm trying to remember what we called Pitt House Park before. It wasn't actually considered a park. It was something else. And we weren't putting the same service level into that because it wasn't, I believe it was green space, but it might be something else. As we go through the survey, are we differentiating that our old processes of how we defined what a park was versus what a green space or a natural space was?
I see we have Brent with his hand up. Maybe he can answer that.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, Mayor Martin, parks is more of a term to define use. And that's a poor answer to say that a park use can be contained on a lot, which is what Pitt House Park was. It was originally a lot. It can be in what I call a capital P park, which means it's designated by legal plan as a park. And it can also be designated as a provincial park or under other jurisdictions by that same classification. So Pitt House Park was originally a lot. and it was reclassified as a park by rededication of a plan. And for that, I did need to get council intent to do that. Otherwise, you can define any land area to have the use of a park. But what your limiter is you can't commit development cost charge fundings or DCC improvements, which you can have a DCC program for park improvement and park acquisition. And if it's not classified a park under legal title, so not lot 1 acting as a park, but actually classified as a park, then you can't expend those funds for that purpose. So very typically our reserve funds are set up for the specific use in park spaces, which means it needs that designator. But that's the subtlety that you remember it.
Okay, thank you. If I may, Chair, just a second question. In regards to as we roll this park survey and plans out, will we be looking at all in regards to connections to the parks and ways that we can utilize and best utilize how we move residents from one park to another in a safe manner?
Yes, through the chair. It's Kate Evans here. I think I can answer that initially, and if Ian wants to say anything and follow up. So we have certainly been thinking about that as we looked at the system in Colwood. Certainly, there's actually a good degree of parkland space, but another thing that's the quantity kind of measure, but then you also look at distribution and access and other things. And so one of the things that we did ask about in phase 1 for people is connectivity, and the relationship of trails and kind of connections or linear parks is actually one of the categories that we've come up with. And really, those are kind of spaces that are dedicated and set up in such a way where they're not necessarily destinations in and of themselves, but they're ways to connect different residential areas to others. There's always an interplay between a Parks and Recreation master plan and active transportation. And so that's actually one of the questions that we asked in the comparator studies that we did with 5 neighboring communities, is to clarify how each of them manage that, because the trails do overlap and serve both a connection for school children walking to school, and for people getting to and fro on bike and foot, et cetera. And then there's the more on-road infrastructure. And so I think what the question that you're asking there with connections ties into that. So we actually do have an active transportation specialist, Richard Drudel, on our team, and we've gone through with him as part of the analysis and looked at where the key opportunities are, or what role active transportation within parks is playing. We do make a bit of a distinction, knowing that staff has planned for a separate and somewhat concurrent process specific to active transportation, and so there's an interplay there, but we're focused specifically on connections and roles and things within areas dedicated as park, and kind of key principles to inform the broader active transportation system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
You good? Okay. I don't want to be rude to the councillors here. I see Ian Borhill has his hand up, probably to respond to some of the mayor's comments. So Ian, do you want to say something?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think my comments were covered off there. I just mentioned that what we're calling the Active Transportation Network Plan is actually what's in the strategic plan. It's a 10-year capital plan for sidewalks and bike lanes. So we're looking at that process as being an update to previous work. And as Ms. Evans mentioned, one of the criteria would be how those specific sidewalks and cycle infrastructure link to park assets.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. I'm just curious, based on a lot of feedback that I've been getting recently about wildlife in Colwood, will your park plan be looking at whether or not the wildlife that we have, if their needs are being met through our parks? For example, I certainly don't know what our keystone species would be, but I've done some reading on that, and it might perhaps be the barred owl. So I'm just wondering, what does Colwood need to do in order to ensure that the wildlife that we enjoy watching and living near now will still be here for the next generation.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Day. I think certainly environment and a slightly more detailed look at environment as it pertains to species and kind of connectivity of wildlife spaces, and looking at continuous areas which are key for certain species, like, and also perimeter distances are also key for other species. So for instance, Havenwood Park is an intact kind of large area with forest cover and would be large enough to support things like barred owls and pileated woodpeckers, etc. As part of the Parks and Recreation Master Planning process, we don't do detailed work that gets into looking at specifically servicing species or how that integrates within the system. However, there is no separation of the value of protecting natural spaces and environment as part of one of the roles, not only that are important for a community, but that is really valued, I think, for the city of Colwood in particular. And so we've asked people to help understand what are the key values for the park system in Colwood, and that helps us to know where to put our emphasis when we're looking at the opportunities for improving or how we move going forward. And so I think there is a level, but it's a slightly higher level, I think, that is kind of embedded in the process that we have and in the principles that are put forward. And there could be some recommendations in terms of policies or process that could be carried out to look into some more specifics if there are key areas that are looking at being wildlife corridors or having special populations. But we're, as a part of this process, as the planning process itself, we're not doing any in-field kind of detailed investigations of those species.
Okay, and the other issue that has been sort of on the radar for probably 15 years now has been to try to develop some informational signage in our parks about the flora and the fauna that's there. Will that be looked into at all?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And certainly I think I can say for every Parks Master Plan process that I've been a part of, there has been a component that's looked into wayfinding in general. So that's overall signage. Your background actually has a really good example of the general park wayfinding signage that has started to be implemented by Sandra and the team at the city. But the component you're speaking about is one of the layers to that overall system, which is interpretive signage. And it is a way to support and integrate goals in the community if they come forward as a priority to support environment and education. And those are quite common trends that we will see, but we'll be looking specifically to the outcome of the data that comes into to understand what kind of a role that will play for Colwood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Kobayashi? Where'd he go? He fell off his chair.
He fell off his chair.
Yeah, I got excited here. Thank you very much for the presentation, Kate. Your enthusiasm is a bit infectious here. So I sort of think I got the question answered by Brent, but I'm not too sure. I guess the question is, well, first of all, I was going to ask Kate if she could send us, her definition of the criteria they use to classify the parks, your classification system. It's just out of interest, because management decisions are going to be made based on that. So it'd be very interesting to see what criteria you used. So my second question is towards Brent, I guess. I think you answered my questions that DCCs can be used for parks, or some parks, as long as they're called a park. Can you clarify that just a little more with me?
Sure. So through the chair, staff have begun working on, we have not tabled through council, a parks improvement DCC. We are able to have a parks acquisition DCC if it was passed through bylaw, and a park improvement DCC, which is separate than some of our amenity contributions or policy towards that. So we are able to establish DCCs for that. But, and you hit the nail on the head when you said, is there a term that's necessary? Yes. You cannot you should not spend park improvement or park acquisition DCCs to acquire a lot used for park purposes. It's for the intensive purposes that's intended for. So it has to be a park for a park, similar use.
Okay, thank you very much. And as far as Kate, could you provide what you use for your classification system?
Certainly, through the chair. Yes, Councillor Kobayashi, there's a kind of longer version than the few slides that I showed there that gives the outline of what establishes and what kind of key criteria or descriptions are put in place that helped us to identify that system for Colwood. And we worked kind of closely with staff as well as maintenance and operations to come up with a fit. So I'd be happy to share that. That'll be a key part of the document overall, but has been drafted already in phase 1.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter.
I'm a bit uncomfortable with the term undeveloped park because it seems to imply that the aim is development. And if you ever talk about developing a park in a neighborhood, people usually get upset because they think that means there's going to be buildings built on it. So what defines an undeveloped park in this list?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor Baxter, that's a very good question. And for some of the classifications, sometimes the coming up with the right wording is it's more difficult actually than the criteria. So the purpose or intent of that category, that draft category currently is really, they are parcels that were dedicated for the most part through development, but are not maintained or outwardly known to be parkland. So they're within the city's system, we know through the city's mapping, et cetera, that those are all parcels, but they don't have any signs, or in some cases, they're actually not even accessible just through how development and park allocation happened in past. Sometimes it's kind of a steeper or rocky slope that actually mostly falls between two areas of residential development. And so it does offer kind of a visual green space, but there are no amenities, even as far as a simple trail or a trailhead sign or a bench or nothing like that. And so one of the reasons that we've specifically singled these out is because we find in a lot of communities, when we go through the process, which is a good one, but has its limitations of doing the more quantitative metrics and analysis, if there's a significant amount of parkland that is undeveloped parkland that is grouped into a neighborhood park category or something, it can kind of give us an unclear picture actually of what the actual active or usable and known parkland is actually like for the city. And so we wanted to be able to go through the process of looking at those numbers, both including and not including the areas that are undeveloped. And so I think there's very little intention for most of those of development, but it's just a matter of understanding. Most of them are not, there may be a few people in the neighborhood that technically know, there's no house there and it is parkland, but most people wouldn't know those spaces actually to even be parks. And so that's why we've classified them as they're kind of undeveloped or unmaintained spaces. And so we can certainly consider it looking at a different name that doesn't lead to the idea that any of these spaces are therefore candidates for development. That's certainly not the intent. It's an effort to look at what the kind of maintained and used parkland area is for the city, as well as technically what the overall parkland tenure is for the city. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think when some of these parks were dedicated, the intention was that they were somehow a nature park. And a nature park, in my view, doesn't necessarily mean that people have a way in. Sometimes, as was the original intention, perhaps with Murray's Pond Park, it was felt that it was good to keep people out, although that's now changed. And I know some of these parks that, in my memory, were dedicated with the intent that they would just be natural. They are in fact just full of weeds. So it's variable. Maybe we could just call them unlabeled parks, but I leave that to the process perhaps. I'm very glad to see that for the second phase of the process, so I'm looking at the page that's part green and part blue columns. So in the second part of that we have things like design charrettes. Speaking as somebody who was just a citizen taking part in the process for the OCP, I was very disappointed in that process because while there was a great deal of public engagement, asking the public what they wanted, the public had no role that was simply because of very short time frames, as well as the lack of process around the public being able to say, well, that isn't what we meant when we said that. So you get input from the public and then you turn it into a written document. And then it's good to take it back to the public. And I presume from what I read in these blue columns that there will be some of that. So I'm very pleased to see that. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. I don't believe I have any hands up. Anybody have anything more to add before we move along? I guess not. Kate, thank you very much for that presentation. Keep up the good work and we'll monitor it with interest as it proceeds.
Thank you very much.
Next, we move to item 6.1, the draft economic recovery plan. And we can turn this over to Ian Borhill, please. Ian, can you lead us through what you have there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen here. Okay. So it's quite a pleasure for staff to present our draft economic recovery plan. This presentation is going to walk the committee through the contents of the plan as well as talk about some of the inputs that led to the proposed actions. So just to contextualize, this plan really is a component of the city's response to COVID-19. Overall, the city is operating within 90-day operational plans at the moment. And I must say that almost all operations have been affected. So really want to frame this as just one of the many outcomes of COVID-19 that the city is dealing with. So as committee may recall, council back in May challenged staff to come up with a draft recovery plan within 30 days. And so here it is. Right now we're looking at this as a draft plan. We are engaging with the business community with respect to their thoughts on its contents, and we are really hoping that the committee can give us some initial thoughts as to which actions and strategies are winners and which are losers, and which we should look at as non-starters potentially. The next step in this process, after we get feedback from the committee and you provide your recommendation to council, would be for staff to develop costing and budgets, and we return to council for potential budget approval. So to make sure that the challenge was met in terms of also getting right to work with immediate action, we hired a program coordinator, which I'm happy to introduce to the committee. Ms. Rachel Buski, if you could just say a little bit about yourself.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I would like to start by saying thank you. I have been looking for an opportunity to support my local community at this time in the context of COVID. So I'm super grateful for this opportunity to lead Colwood's economic recovery program. I personally believe this to be really extremely important project for the community. Regarding my background, I have 20 years experience as a project manager, working for various government organisations, leading technical projects in the realm of like asset management, change management, procurement type projects. And during the last 5 years, I focused on the development industry. I really feel that I have a unique set of skill sets and experience that makes me a good fit for this role. And I'm sure that I can successfully lead this program for you.
Thanks, Rachel. So as I mentioned, Rachel's working with an initial 8-week contract to assist staff with the recovery actions. So I certainly found this very rewarding, and speaking to folks inside City Hall, we've really enjoyed putting together a plan that was directly coming from the business community and the residents in terms of the great work we did early on in this process through our business survey and the recovery roundtables. It's also important to emphasize that this really is a project and a plan that was customized to Colwood's context. It's quite unique in that the vast majority of our workforce is working outside of Colwood, and our business profile is relatively unique as well in terms of there being quite a few folks that are working from home, and the relative size of our commercial sector is small. This graph that was included in the plan shows the relative percentage of our Colwood workforce in terms of the sectors they're employed in relative to the region. As you can see, there's a few standout statistics. So interestingly, there's quite a few people in Colwood employed by government relative to the region, as well as in retail, trade, and construction. So you can see there is really a mix of employees here, or folks in Colwood that are employed by sectors that are both resilient and potentially vulnerable to the impacts of COVID-19. And if we look at the sectors that have seen the most change in terms of employment, both on the plus and minus side, we can see that public administration, aka government work, has seen an increase in employment since February to May this year, which bodes well for Colwood given the extent to which Colwoodians work in that sector. And then also, if we look at construction, we haven't seen major layoffs in that sector, which is also a good thing for Colwood. So this graph, which was also included in the plan, shows where our businesses are working, which sectors are working within. We've got quite a few businesses of the total 570 licensed businesses in Colwood. We've got quite a few that are categorized within the services. Secondly, close second is construction. So of all of the business licenses in Colwood, 41% operate in multiple municipalities and 20% are defined as home-based businesses. So when we look at if people in Colwood work, which is largely outside of Colwood, we look at the business profile, which includes a lot of very much regionally integrated businesses. We can't really use conventional economic development as an approach here. We have to get more creative. So we're proposing a more holistic approach, an approach that emphasizes looking at the challenges through a household prosperity lens. So by trying to improve the economic performance of the community on the household level, we have a greater potential to improve people's lives here in Colwood as opposed to strictly looking at the business sector. So given that context, staff felt that the existing BC interim disaster recovery framework that was released by the province last year really was a good fit for this plan. It emphasizes, once again, a holistic approach and a approach that has a lot of really good integrations with the fundamentals on the ground here in Colwood. With respect to the goals of the plan, reflecting that whole community economic response, we emphasize, first of all, the reduction of negative impacts to Colwood businesses, as well as trying to improve the long-term community resilience. So that's tying into the principle of building back better. And lastly, the objective is to support community well-being and improve quality of life, once again at that household prosperity level. So looking at the household as the fundamental economic unit. Another important aspect of this is the strategic partnerships that we've proposed as part of the plan. So in both cases, the West Shore Chamber of Commerce and the South Island Prosperity Partnership have their own recovery efforts. The wording in the plan in terms of how they're situated as partners has been approved by both organizations. And most important, we're hoping to leverage our shared resources as well as to avoid duplication of efforts. So in terms of immediate actions, as I said, council challenged staff to get going out the gate and to help as best we could back in May, get going with recovery. So I'm going to ask Rachel to join us again and talk about some of the things we're doing right now.
Thank you, Ian. This week, I'm focusing on contacting every Colwood business, starting with the most vulnerable. This is to build relationships and gain insights into how the city can help and getting them involved in the plan itself. We're taking a really almost like a concierge approach. I'm asking the businesses how they're doing, listening to what they think would be helpful for them, and hearing their story, really what's happened to them in the last months and how they're doing generally, if things are picking up or if they're still in decline. I'm also gathering data on which businesses are interested in which of the proposed actions and initiatives are included in the action plan. I started with the businesses most significantly impacted, and to identify those business types, we took the BC provincial data on the number of job losses in each sector. And through that, we identified that accommodation and food were potentially at risk, healthcare and social assistance, and the retail trade. So I began calling accommodation and food businesses. Some businesses have increased revenue and are seeing more visitors to their business, but the larger percentage are starting to recover, with some not doing so well at all. For example, I actually was able to talk to Judy, the business owner of Jasmine's, and Judy explained to me that she's been really very open with all her customers that she's not doing so well at the moment, and since March they took a significant decline in business, and they're really not sure if they'll be able to make it past September with how they're doing at the moment. Apparently a very large portion of their clientele were elderly folks. About 40% of our customers were the elderly, and only 10% of those they've seen return, because people are still quite concerned about the risk within the community of COVID reoccurring. And so really discussing ways with business owners about what might help them at this time, and other actions that they would be supportive of, for example, of the actions that are listed in the plan that we have presented to you this evening. All of the businesses that I spoke to were on board with the local advertising campaign. They were super interested to hear about the sign bylaw review. Several businesses were interested in potentially borrowing a sandwich board to be able to place it on the pavement and say to the public, yes, we are open for business, please buy local, that kind of thing. And several of the businesses were also really very interested in vouchers in lieu of the spring cleanup this year. So the more businesses I'm speaking to, the more information I'm getting. And it's really very interesting, actually, and quite a unique opportunity to help the real people in this community.
Thanks, Rachel. So I just mentioned that the committee members will start seeing signs that the city have purchased that we are going to be providing directly to businesses. So Sandra has done a great, our communication manager, Sandra Russell, has done a great job in supporting the effort and coordinated the creation of these signs that will be distributed, starting with the businesses that have been identified as being the most potentially vulnerable to the impacts of COVID-19. So we've already jumped into some of the tactics and strategies that are proposed within the action plan. And so the next few slides really just take a slice of several of the actions that we feel are demonstrative of each of the main goals. So at this point, I'd ask that committee, please feel free, and Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me, if folks have a question or comment that to jump in. And certainly if the committee is interested in going through the action plan itself, I can bring up the PDF of the table. So the first goal, which was to reduce the negative impacts of COVID-19 pandemic to Colwood businesses. The objectives under that goal included minimize Colwood business and development failures and associated layoffs. And this would include not-for-profit organizations, as well as to protect consumer access to Colwood commercial amenities like Jasmine Restaurant. So the actions that are being proposed as part of that overall goal and objectives are to, for example, action 1.5, allow retail and food sales in parking areas and boulevards. So council will see a report from staff later this month, I believe on the 15th, that would provide a way, will give council a way to enshrine that action. The next one here is a buy local campaign. So this is something that other municipalities are looking at, and we're certainly seeing it as a potential winning tactic in terms of what the business is telling us. Under the second goal, which is to improve long-term community resilience, the objectives in this area are to enhance the understanding of Colwood's economy, to increase the city's capacity to undertake economic development activities, and protect and diversify the municipal tax base. So this really is getting at the heart of that Build Back Better idea. The hope is that through the work we're doing now to help the local economy, we'd be building up a much more robust set of data, as well as a system for us to be more reactive on the ground when future economic issues create problems, as well as to take advantage of opportunities as they arise in the future. So really it's about creating a foundation for economic development beyond COVID-19. So we've got some of the potential actions that under that goal number 2 presented there. So goal number 3, support well-being and improve quality of life. The objectives under this third goal are to support the entire community, including Colwood households that are sustained by out of Colwood employment or not otherwise engaged in the workforce, and to support vulnerable populations affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are, really getting into areas that are focused on the household prosperity level. And really this is where we're getting into areas that are more potentially broader than what you'd seen in a classic economic development response. So 2 of the example actions from this section include a neighborhood placemaking contest where neighborhoods would compete for seed funding for local neighborhood improvements. So the city of Victoria has a very similar, very successful program that's been well loved by various neighborhoods in that city. Action 3.12, promote services for people experiencing mental illness. So we are really lacking knowledge here within the city in terms of what's out there for services. We feel an inventory of social services, especially with respect to supporting people suffering from mental illness, is important. And this is some work that we could do quickly and hopefully promote within the community so that others become aware of what's available. So in terms of implementation and evaluation and monitoring, we're proposing that there be a recovery report card presented both to council and the public on a quarterly basis. And we're hoping that it can be a very understandable, succinct web page that we would be updating on a quarterly basis. We're hoping to have measurable indicators once again, not just for the COVID-19 recovery effort, but to build a foundation for economic development long-term. With that, I thank you for your time and conclude my presentation. Before you is the staff recommendation associated with this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borhill. And Rachel, I'm sorry I missed your last name. Thank you as well. First, if I could go to Councillor Baxter for some comments and questions.
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is that I'm not comfortable passing this, all of these tables, all of the items in these tables as one motion. I think that there's some really good stuff here, and there's some that is actually negative. So for instance, the idea of providing IT help to local businesses from within our IT staff is actually competing with local Colwood businesses who do that. And I don't think it's a positive thing to compete directly with our own businesses. That's to say nothing of the problem of deciding who you would serve first, since you can't possibly serve all of the potential customers at once. And I also believe there are legal issues about assisting businesses. But I'd like to know if anybody has any definite information on that. So I'd like to suggest that we perhaps go section by section and just see who wants to take out or modify any of the items in a section before we pass that section. So that's a proposal to you, Mr. Councillor Parkinson, as your chair.
Okay, I think I'm going to let the others speak first before we get to that, but not opposed. Can I move on now, Michael?
Yep, absolutely.
Councillor Kobayashi?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the report, Ian. I did submit some of my comments, my initial review of going through the document. Like Councillor Baxter, I found some of the things in there I didn't think belonged in there, because the whole thing is that when we first started this was the objective was to help our businesses. That was the initial intent when we started the whole initiative to look at the impact of COVID-19 on the businesses. So we're in there to assist where it made sense to, where we weren't competing with other businesses. I must agree, though, as I said to you before, Ian, you can certainly teach old dogs new tricks. The holistic approach that you are taking, the filter you're using is household prosperity. And that's an interesting metric, because it's probably the most suitable for the city of Colwood, because we have a very small portion of our tax base is actually based out for businesses. And we certainly fall under that model that we're not a neighborhood economy here. Maybe if we were located 50 kilometers down the road and we were by ourselves and we had to depend on ourselves, we would definitely be a neighborhood economy. But we are a part of the regional economy, considering 90% of our people don't even work in 90% plus don't even work in the city. So before we go through each of these objectives, this is what I agree with Councillor Baxter, but I think this needs a little more filtering. For example, if you are using that filter right now of household prosperity being the metric that we're going to use, if that's what everyone agrees to here, then I think that you need to do a Pareto on this right now to help whittle this down, because there are a number of initiatives that I don't think fall under that category of household prosperity. I mean, you could argue sub level that it's connected somehow, but if you do a Pareto of what really will impact the economic prosperity of or household prosperity of the citizens, I think you'll be able to filter out a lot of the initiatives that you have. And like I said, I just went through, and my comments that I had submitted and you had responded back to all the councillors was my first shot at it. And after looking at it even more, there are a number of initiatives that we are directly competing with other businesses, which Councillor Baxter absolutely pointed out. And there's certainly some initiatives that we just don't want to be in, because we're not a bank here, and I know and I understand the philosophy that you're trying to get to, but again, it doesn't go back to the whole household prosperity metric as the filter. So I think there's way too many initiatives. I believe that we're biting off more than what we can chew. And I give you full credit because you've taken the feedback from businesses and all the round tables, and you've managed to group them and put them in this document, and which I give you full applause for, but it's way too much, and it's way too much for us to bite on. So I was going to suggest that you take another shot at this. This is draft. I think it does need to go through another filter and really use that household prosperity as one of the key filters, and then just start eliminating, because some of the initiatives are definitely quality of life, and I believe we have another strategic imperative which actually addresses quality of life, and that some of these belong there, not under this economic recovery action plan. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh,
Kobayashi.
one last thing I did say, and when you do all this, it would be great to summarize everything. I mentioned this to Ian, to summarize this in a spreadsheet to sort of say, here's 2020, 2021, et cetera, for our financial plan, what all this is going to cost us for every year, to do a summary, because it's not there. So, we may be approving things that we can't even afford. Thanks.
Ian, I see your hand up. Did you want to respond before I go to the others?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize the fact that staff really are looking at this as the opportunity for committee to give us feedback as to which of the actions they feel are winners and which are those that they think might not be a best fit for our recovery plan. I have to say, though, that this is not a conventional economic recovery plan. We are really looking at an entire community recovery plan from an economic perspective, in ways in which that are hard potentially to see connections at first. But at the household prosperity level, we're really dealing with people who potentially may be on fixed incomes. They may be students. They may be people who are working well outside of our community and in another region. So finding tactics that improve their lives from an economic level really does mean thinking creatively and differently. So I just encourage the committee to think of this as something that would involve areas that are perhaps out of our comfort zone, to be honest. So, and that's intentional.
Thank you for that. Mayor Martin.
Thank you. I want to celebrate this. I think this is fantastic. I spent most of the day today on a conference call with the province, basically going over the BC Restart program. And what I can legitimately say is we are, as a city of Colwood, we're at least 6 weeks ahead of where the province is. On this call, we also had mayors from other jurisdictions. And when we began talking about economic recovery in those communities, it became really clear to me as well that we're probably 10 weeks ahead of most jurisdictions. And so I think this is fantastic. I love the fact that we're being progressive. I understand that there's issues that we may want to fine tune a couple things. I sincerely hope we don't go line by line by this. I hope that tonight, if there are concerns from Councillor Baxter or Councillor Kobayashi on a specific subject that we probably shouldn't be, that we have a motion to remove that one, rather than spending hours looking at this. I guess the other thing that I really want to focus on too is the BC government has announced that they have $1.5 million fund to get people back to work. And that was the majority of what today's call was about. And that was the province really asking, how do we spend this money? How can we spend this money in your community to actually get people back to work? Excluding CERB and all those things. And I think that's one of the directions we seriously need to consider as we move this forward, is that there is going to be a fair amount of dollars available to the city. And again, if we're ahead of the game, and if we're 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks ahead of other jurisdictions, we're going to be able to chase that money a lot faster and a lot quicker. So I get concerned when we talk about doing a reorg and looking at coming back. I think this is action time for us. we're only going to keep this lead for a very short period of time. Other communities are going to catch up. But we're ready now, and I'm excited about this. I think we can fine tune it, but I sincerely believe that most of the action items I'm actually quite supportive of. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Councillor Day.
Thank you. There are a few goals in the plan that, well, I do think it's a very good plan overall. I think that, you know, it looks to me when I read the plan that anything and everything that we could do that would move Colwood in a positive direction has been included here. And some of those, to my way of thinking at least, do not really warrant our getting into them. For example, looking at ways to support development. But we know from the data that there have been no layoffs in development, that our developments are progressing. So looking at ways to facilitate development doesn't seem to fit for me, in that is not one of the areas that's really hurting. I mean, everyone is feeling it, but in terms of, you know, massive impacts, they're not anywhere near the top of the list. So I think in order to be effective, we should refine what we're doing and try to put our emphasis on the biggest bang for our buck. And that way, I think we'll be more effective in the long run. So I do appreciate that this is a really excellent compilation of brainstorming ideas to help move Colwood forward. And I think it's been well presented, but we don't know the costs yet. And there are some things in here that don't seem to be as well connected as other parts of it to actually being able to move Colwood forward with the funding that we have currently in place. So I would support some of these initiatives, but not all of these initiatives. And I really would like to try to focus our efforts on helping the most vulnerable. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ian, I see your hand popping up again if you wanted to respond to something, and then I'm going to go back to, there's others to talk to. Ian, did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, two comments. One with respect to development. It's important to note that there are some forecasts which suggest that there could be a downturn in the midterm as a result of COVID-19 that would affect our local development industry. So we're not out of the woods yet with respect to that sector. And secondly, it's really important for the committee to understand that at this stage, staff are recommending that this plan be endorsed in principle, and that we return with a comprehensive costing analysis. So now's the time to tell us whether you think some of the actions are not worthy of that second step. But when we do get to that second stage, you will have probably the best opportunity and the most information to determine which are the tactics and strategies that we move forward with.
Thank you. Doug, I'm going to go to Dean before I go back to you for the second time, if I may. Councillor Jansen.
Thanks. There's a lot of great meat on the bone here, and it's much appreciated, and a lot of ideas that wouldn't have even occurred to me. Just a point about staying in our lane a little bit here. I got a little bit lost when we got into some of the mental health and the housing and those types of initiatives, although there's no issue with them, but I'm not sure how they connect with economic recovery. I mean, I guess they speak to resiliency and helping all of the members of our community out. But specifically, I'm looking for the true economic things we can do here to help our residents along. And just as a point, as far as the metrics being used, what is it? Household prosperity is that what the term was? Mr. Chair, do I have that right?
Yes, you do. Yes.
We are a bedroom community of many government workers, and I know that we spoke a lot about downturns and people losing jobs, and I know at least on my street and in my friend circle, almost nobody lost any work, and if they did, they were properly supported or somewhat supported by the federal government through their various programs. So as far as metrics go, I bet we would find that, you know, a very high contingent of our residents actually worked through this. I know myself and Gord, we worked continuously through this, being the only two that work on council, I think. But my point is, I love seeing these initiatives supporting our business community. I think that that's where I feel the most need is in our community, is supporting these smaller businesses. Not so much the development community. I agree with Councillor Day. So that's my input. There's a lot of good stuff here, and kudos to your team for at least spitballing some of these ideas, because I think they're great. And I do think that we might be able to provide a little more focus from a council perspective for you the second time around. But I would like to move the motion. I don't think anybody has done that yet, Mr. Chair.
You certainly could. Can we go back to Councillor Kobayashi first?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll get it started and you go ahead and carry on with the dialogue.
Okay, Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think that everyone is saying the same thing. I'm hearing the same elements over and over, I guess. And what I'm afraid of right now is this is a very comprehensive document, and no one said it was a bad document. It is very comprehensive, but I guess the question comes down to affordability. And the reason why we are so far ahead, because I am your SIP representative, is and that other municipalities are so far behind is because everyone's riding on the coattails of SIP. And I know exactly how fast that's moving, and they are, I would say, 10 weeks behind at least. And so what we've got in front of us is a great document, but it's just a matter of filtering this right now, because there are a lot of objectives here. And like I said, it goes back to what was the original objective of this, and that was for the business recovery. And yet I see some other objectives that have been thrown in here because we've used another filter. And I'm not saying it's wrong at all. I'm just saying that there's another filter that's been thrown on this, and it's a more comprehensive filter, and hence we got what we have. And what I'm suggesting is that, I mean, I'm willing to support a motion to actually endorse this in principle, but it does need some refinement, and we got to look at putting another filter on this right now, because it's just an exercise in futility when you see the cost. And I know this cost could be very, very high. I've got a gut feel that just says this, if you were to look at this line by line here, the potential. So, you know, I guess it's a matter for council to decide if we want to put the filter back on to getting our businesses to recover. And that list here becomes a lot shorter and much more manageable. And I think it's, you know, it's absolutely, we can eat this elephant little piece by piece here. So I guess the point is that, and what I meant by Pareto, I don't think everyone understood. A Pareto basically is, you know, there's 20% of the issues here are going to solve 80% of our problems. And I think that's the situation we're in here. We've got to look at this right now, look at it through that filter. Let's prioritize this, cut with the category and say prioritize this, and then just cut off the ones that just don't make the priority list here, or it's going to make it much easier when they present an all-encompassing budget after they do this whole process, and we're all going to look at it and say, geez, we should filter this. But, so I'm just saying, just do it now and save ourselves the trouble, because I know some of these things are going to be just not attainable. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so just before we move on, maybe I'll throw my 2 cents worth in. I think first we should all recognize that a month or so ago, we did ask our staff to fly at this and see what they could do to help. And they've obviously done a Herculean task in pulling all this together in that time frame. So I think I agree with everybody that an awful lot of stuff in here, an awful lot of good stuff, but an awful lot of stuff and maybe too much stuff. So just to summarize from what I've heard so far, Michael was saying, well, let's go through section by section and determine, what we're good with, what we're not good with. Doug says he thinks it needs a little more filtering, worried about affordability and where's the cost going to go. The mayor said, celebrate, this is fantastic, don't do line by line, but yeah, we have to fine tune. Councillor Day, some items maybe not be warranted. Refine what we are doing, biggest bang for the buck, what we're doing, and some notes of mine that I can't read. Dean Jansen says, stay in our lane. And I think we're all kind of wandering around the same thing. I don't know how to pull it all together, to be perfectly honest. I think it's unfair, frankly, to just throw it all back to the staff and say, yeah, this is great, we're not 100% happy with it, so come back and make us 100% happy. That's unfair. Going through it line by line and saying, I like this, I like that, having debates would just, we'd all be crazy by 2 a.m. by the time we got anywhere. We'd be going around in circles, we can guarantee that. So I guess, to be honest, I'm looking for a solution. We want you to go forward. We want the ability to help you filter between now and coming back to us with what you promised, a summary and detailed budgetary implications. And I don't know how to do that without perhaps going through it line by line or section by section. I see the board's lighting up now. Well, and here we go. Now we got some action. It's like the pinball machine at the casino going ding, 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 ding. So I'm going to use my power as chair to start where I feel like it. CAO Earl, could you comment, please?
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. If you're looking for a tactical approach from this point forward, might I recommend that a member of the committee move goal 1.0, which includes tactics from 1.1 to 1.16. But within that motion, delete those tactics that mover believed were inappropriate, and then make those same steps for goal 2 and goal 3. I think it's more achievable with that methodology.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
So if we went through it line by line, we would be here till the early hours of the morning. The administrator is suggesting we do it by goal. What I'm suggesting is we include, doing it by goal is basically 3 motions with amendments. I'm suggesting we do it by, for instance, I'm actually going to propose right now to try and get this thing moving, that we move numbers 1.1 to 1.11, all of which come under the heading minimize Colwood business and development failures and associated layoffs. Now, if we do it this way, there's only 6 headings like that. So we should be able to get through it fairly quickly. And I think to meet Robert's Rules of Order, the only way to do this is if I move it and then people make amendments to it as they wish. When there's no more amendments, then we move on.
Just as a point of order, Mr. Chair, I'll withdraw my original motion just so we don't get dueling motions going on.
Okay, that's a little tidier. So Michael, so I'm clear, you're moving that you're going to move 1.1 to 1.11?
Yes, and if I can once you've dealt with it, if I can just motivate, it'll take me a minute.
Well, I don't need a seconder, so go ahead and motivate.
Okay, so I'm thinking that if we talk too much, we don't go through all this tonight, at least we will have some sections that have been approved. And since we're all pretty much agreed, there's probably more work here that staff can do before the next meeting. I would suggest that at least gives them a lot to chew on, even if we don't make it all the way through.
Okay, I'm going to lower all the hands because I have no idea who wanted to talk about what. We do have that motion on the floor to accept goals 1.1 to 1.11, which I think was thrown out with the understanding that there would be additions and deletions. So if anybody, okay, I have a bunch of hands here to talk on that. So let's get at her. Well, they seem like the same hands. I don't know if they went away or not.
Yeah, I didn't see them go away.
Well, they're popping up all over the place. Whatever. I'm going to start at the top this time. CAO Earl, do you want to go? Or is your hand repetitive?
Sorry, that was my hand from before.
Okay, Mayor Martin, was that your hand from before, or do you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. The one point that I would like to make to this committee is when you start explaining things, unless you feel very, very confident that this is not a city mandate, that the city should not be involved in this whatsoever, you need to understand we don't know what the province is going to fund moving forward. And when we start taking things out, you will be very surprised what we could have got funding for. And as you've heard, the idea was in principle, these are the things that we're working on that will come back to committee. And I would suggest in the next month, we're going to have a very, very clear idea of where we could actually probably attract funding from. And I would hate for the fact that we start excluding things off of this list and it becomes quite apparent that we could have easily got funding to do it. And so I'm very hesitant to remove anything at this time. I'm quite happy to remove stuff as we move forward and we start understanding that this is a budgetary constraint that is going to be imposed onto Colwood residents, Colwood taxpayers. But to this point, I will be actually supporting everything that's on the list, unless there's an argument from a councillor who would be saying we shouldn't be in this business. Because I sincerely believe there is going to be significant funding available, and we're really limiting ourselves by excluding things. So I would be supporting the motion that moved.
Well,
because it's going through 11, and so I'm very comfortable with supporting all 11.
So you'd vote against the 11, but you'd vote for all of them if they were all together.
No, I said I'll be supporting.
I'm so sorry. Excuse me. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Sorry, just trying to get so I can see there. I would like to propose an amendment to remove 1.6 and 1.7 because two reasons. One, we could always bring them back at a later date if there is an issue that we need to address. And my other reason for removing them is we can get into some difficulties with providing incentives. There's a whole rigmarole of things that we've talked about before in terms of not being allowed to help one business and not another, and you have to have business improvement areas. And I just think those are both lengthy things that could be looked at a later date.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask for some clarity here. I have an amendment to a motion. Do I need a seconder on amendment? At committee of the whole?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. So then let's discuss the amendment. I'm going to drop everybody's hands, which I have Mayor Martin, Councillor Day, Kobayashi, and Baxter. I'm going to lose them all, and you can start again. Which has the same 4 hands up. Is that correct, or have I done something wrong? Oh, I know what I did wrong. Lower all hands. Okay, can we start again? If you'd like to talk on the amendment. Councillor Baxter.
I support the amendment. I don't see any information that tells me the construction industry is in trouble. They may not be just as healthy as they were before, but certainly we have other business lines that are much more in trouble. And therefore, I think if 1.6 and 1.7 are taken out, as Councillor Day says, they can be brought back later if there is clear information that that I'm not aware of, that we're not aware of. But I think if they're going to come back, we need more information on a bit more detail and what the effect on the city would be financially.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be supporting the amendment. While it might not have an immediate effect on the recovery, I think these are policy decisions that can affect some renewal and growth in certain strategic areas within the city that is unique. And so I think as a council, we should be sending staff the message that we want you to look at something strategic like this, regardless if it's due to COVID or not, but we can't be operating as we are now if we want to be competitive. And I see those two items as part of the city's recovery by stimulating some redevelopment within the municipality.
Thank you. Ian Borhill, did you want to chime in?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to emphasize the fact that, these items, if you look at the budget item, or the budget column, we've associated a lot of these tactics with the funding of the program coordinator role. With respect to the two items that are being discussed, these are initiatives that would come back to committee of the whole and then to council if committee was willing as proposals. So there would be a full-fledged staff report associated with the initiatives for council to consider.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, along the same lines as Councillor Logan, I'm fine with those ones, and I'm not in favor of removing them. But there's developers and they're developers. So some are mom and pop operations that have employees, and others are some of the major corporations they deal with. But looking inward and reviewing our processes and reducing red tape, I'm all for that stuff.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to lower all hands. I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment. The amendment is to remove 1.6 and 1.7 from the motion to approve 1.1 to 1.11. Those in opposition, please. Are you trying to talk, Doug, or you want opposition? Oh, do I have to let you talk? Doug?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to slightly I'm actually against the motion myself because I'd like to just change 1.6 to long-term along with 1.7. 1.7 is already long-term. The two are sort of together to me, and that's sort of the compromise that I'd like to have on this, just to change that to a long-term along with 1.7. I support both, but they should be long-term.
I guess my well, I'm going to even ask Ian to comment on this because my understanding is that item 2.6 that it refers to is the proposal to extend the contract of the project coordinator for another 8 weeks. So, and I'm not sure if either of them are midterm or long term. So, okay.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so to move that item into long term, we would probably be looking at that either being so 1.6 that would be fulfilled by the program coordinator or other staff resources that were reassigned from existing council priorities.
Okay, yep, so that's fair enough. All right, I'm gonna lower all the hands because I don't know if people are trying to talk to the motion or they tried to vote. If anybody wants to talk to the amendment, raise your hand quickly. Okay, you didn't. So now I'm going to call the vote on the amendment, which is to remove 1.6 and 1.7 out of the first 11 things. Those in opposition. Okay, I have Councillor Jansen, Logan, Martin, and Kobayashi opposed. That motion fails. So now we're back to the main motion of approving items 1.1 to 1.11. Is that, you want to speak to that, Mr. Baxter?
I wanted to propose an amendment.
Attaboy, sure.
Okay, I want to alter 1.8 because I don't think we should be advertising individual businesses. I think that what we need is to have, we already have a list of Colwood businesses that have business licenses, but that offers very little information about those businesses. I think we need to create and then to advertise in the paper that we have created a list of all Colwood retail businesses. In other words, businesses that people can go and patronize day to day, and include in that list a link to any web presence that the business might have, and any other information that the staff think could be added to that list that wouldn't overcomplicate it, but would help people to patronize those businesses.
Okay.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair, but we were discussing Michael's motion and now he's amending his motion. So I'm motioned out here.
Suck it up, princess.
Point of
I think
order.
we're just starting. We got about 10 more pages of this stuff. I think.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, I am allowed to amend my own motion. And that was the intent of passing it or promoting it, proposing it.
Groovy. Okay, on the amendment, who wants to change approving the 1.1 to 1.11 by modifying 1.8 in roughly the way Michael expanded it? Those opposed to Michael's amendment? I have Councillor Jansen, Councillor Martin, Councillor Logan, and myself in opposition. The motion, the amendment fails. Can we vote on the main motion, or do people want? Oh, I got hands up. Hang on, I hit the wrong button. I'm learning this. Councillor Kobayashi, would you like to speak on the main motion?
No, you didn't let me speak on the amendment. I had my
bad.
hand up and
Sorry. On the main motion. How do you do this every time, Rob? Those in opposition, do we have any more discussion on the main motion? Okay. Those opposed to the main motion? Those in opposition? Seeing none, that motion passes. Who wants to go to the next page? Councillor Baxter.
I propose we pass 1.12 to 1.16.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? And I'll give you time to talk this time, Doug, I promise.
Well, point of order, Mr. Chairman. If you would lower hands after we've spoken, then we can speak again. Or do you want us to do that ourselves?
So as far as I figured it out, you need to lower your own hands, or I can lower them all, but I can't lower them individually. I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Well, I think His Worship, the Mayor, lowers them all once we move on to discussion.
Yeah, I got that.
Sorry, just to interrupt, Councillor Parkinson, if you go into participants,
yes,
you can also lower individual hands.
Well, thank you very much.
And then you can just lower it that way as well.
Now that you mention it, I think Amanda did teach me that, but it was lost. Councillor Day, I have you next to speak.
Thank you. I am not able to support 1.13 or 1.15 as I believe they are either already underway or inappropriate for us because this is the issue with providing IT support. which is in fact taking business away from other Colwood businesses.
Is that an amending motion?
I would like to propose that we remove 1.13 and 1.15.
Okay, I'm going to lower all hands and we can discuss removing 1.13 and 1.15. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if Councillor Day would separate those. I can support eliminating 1.13, but 1.15, I have a different opinion.
I'm
Councillor
fine with
Day?
that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I'm going to allow comments in general, and then we'll go back to the individual motions. Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. Should motions pass this evening and administration return with budgets, and I'll use 1.13 as an example, we would likely look to a Colwood business to help provide this service, should this be a service that choose to move forward on, or that council chooses to move forward on. And so at the end of the day, even with the delivery of one of these programs, we would do so through a Colwood business where that's available.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, the only part I was thinking about was providing IT support in that wording. I don't mind the rest of it. So I'm not sure how everybody feels about that. That's in 1.13.
Sounds like we're going to split them anyway, so. Okay. Next up is Councillor Baxter.
Can I ask somebody to explain what a store-to-door web portal is?
You can ask.
Hi, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please, Ian.
Hi, yes. So the idea for this one came from the city of Surrey, which has a store-to-door program. So essentially what it does is it creates a web-based clearinghouse for all of the businesses within the municipality that provide their goods and services through the internet. And we would envision it as being part of our city suite of web pages. And just to reiterate what our Chief Administrative Officer stated, that it was probably it was an error for us to simply state provide IT support. The intention was to contract local Colwood services to support that service.
Thank you. So I'm afraid that I'm not able to lower hands individually. So if you have spoken on the topic and could lower your own hand, it would make my life a lot easier. Councillor Day.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order. I got to ask a question, but I didn't get to then comment based on the answer to the question. The reason I asked the question, get the information.
Yes, I stand duly chastised, Mr. Councillor Baxter. Please proceed.
Thank you. Store-to-door web portal was basically what I was talking about, replacing 1.8 with. So I definitely support that. I would ask staff to get a legal opinion on paying IT businesses to do work for individual businesses in Colwood. I thought that support to individual business was illegal, but I certainly support the first part.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm finding this one confusing also because I guess my question after Mr. Earl spoke was really one of why this wouldn't be undertaken by the chamber. They seem to do a lot of things like that when I've talked to other local businesses, and I have actually suggested to them potentially doing online sales to help make up the foot traffic that isn't there. And what I heard from the businesses that I talked to was that They did have support through business partnerships. And in the case of the one business that I specifically asked if they would consider doing the online, decided in the end that it was more work than they wanted to take on, which is fine, but just that I don't know that that's something that isn't already being done by others. And I'm fine if it's not, and Surrey is already doing it, and it's something that's available to all businesses in Colwood. I can't see it as being a bad thing, but the way that it was written left me quite confused. So I guess I'm okay with leaving that in if we're going to get more information later, and maybe I just don't understand it enough yet.
Thank you. I got Ian with his hand up. Ian.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention that all of these draft actions were reviewed by the Chamber of Commerce staff, and they did provide a comment on this one. They thought that this one would be quite challenging for the municipality to take on independently. So we already have had conversations about potentially this being something that we partner with the Chamber on. I know that they've got funding for a summer student to assist with recovery efforts, so that might be an opportunity there. Yeah, that was my comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Excellent.
Is everybody dropping their hands after they've spoken? Do I have people wanting to speak again? Good. Okay, so I believe we have a motion on the floor that deletes 1.13 and 1.15. There's been talk of separating it. Do we want to just do that? Okay.
No.
So let's, if I may, Councillor Day, we'll take your motion to start with removing 1.13.
Sure.
You okay with that? Okay. I think we've discussed that. I'm going to, any in opposition? Okay, I have Martin, Jansen, Kobayashi, Day, and Baxter in opposition to that. So that fails. I'm lowering all hands. And now we're talking about removing 1.15. Who's in opposition to that one?
Can we speak to it?
I thought we had general speaking, but if you like, I will lower all hands and allow you to speak, Mr. Baxter.
Sorry, I was concentrating on 1.13. Can I just ask the question? This is stated that we're going to review the sign bylaw to develop policy. Policy doesn't trump bylaw. So asking staff, would that mean any policy developed would still follow the bylaw?
Hi, Mr. Chair.
Hi, go ahead.
Yeah, the policy has not been fleshed out by any means, but this is a tactic that was developed through consultations at the Recovery Roundtable in terms of there being temporal need to relax sign regulations. And that could be achieved through council not enforcing the bylaw for a specific period. There's obviously legal risks with that approach, but the council does not, there's not a requirement for bylaws to be enforced strictly to the letter of the bylaw in all circumstances.
Understood, thank you.
Okay. Then again, I'm going to ask for a vote on removing 1.15 from the approved steps. Those in opposition? Okay, we have Mayor Martin, Councillor Logan, Councillor Kobayashi, Councillor Jansen, Councillor Baxter, all opposed to removing 1.15. So therefore, I'm going to lower all hands. We return to the main motion, which was to approve 1.12 to 1.16. I don't know who made that motion. I can't remember. Michael, did you make that?
Councillor Baxter, I believe.
I think it was me, yeah.
Okay. We've certainly had a lot of discussion. Do we need any more? Seeing none, those in opposition, please raise your hands. I see no opposition. That motion passes. Moving right along. Michael, do you want to carry on?
Yes, I move 2.1 to 2.4.
Thank you. I see your hand up. Did you want to discuss that?
Yes. I think other people do this, other people with a lot more knowledge than us. Real estate board was mentioned by Councillor Kobayashi as being one that does it. And I think CRD does their own analysis. I think there are already enough brains working on this that it would not be a good use of our time. So I'm talking about 2.1. Did I make that clear? If
No,
not,
you didn't.
that's what I'm talking about. I'm only talking about 2.1, and I'll be moving an amendment to have that one removed. If I could do that now, could I? Yes, I could.
Sure, you could, Michael. So, okay. Lowering all hands. And we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about an amendment to the motion to approve 2.1 to 2.4 to not approve 2.1, to remove 2.1. I have Councillor Kobayashi first to speak.
I was going to boycott you, Mr. Chair.
One little mistake, Doug.
I am going to support Councillor Baxter's amendment because this is not something that we should be doing. The real estate board actually does these type of analyses. This is just way outside, the scope of what we should be doing. So I do not support this one iota.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that my daughter works in a real estate office and they are busy as can be. It's ramping right back up again. Housing prices are up. Houses are selling fast. I don't think this is an area that we need to be involved in.
Thank you. Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I guess, sorry, I don't want to, I do want to comment on it, but just from efficiency standpoint, I'm not exactly sure why we're moving 2.1 to 2.4 and then doing an amendment to remove 2.1. I'm not sure why we're just not moving 2.1 all the way to end of 2.9 and then let people take out what they want. It feels like it was the same thing with one. Like, I'm not sure why we didn't go 1.1 to 1.16 and then let people amend the ones they wanted to take out rather than these constant motions. But that's just me moving forward. So moving forward, I would suggest that we should move the whole blocks the way our CAO had suggested. Saying that, I'm still supportive of leaving this in there. So I will be voting against this amendment.
Okay. Councillor Jansen.
Just a small detail in our numbering there. I just noticed there's two 2.3s, Mr. Chair. So we might want to just amend the numbering to make sure we haven't missed anything.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. I think if we go to 2.2 to 2.4 right here.
My motion included both 2.3s.
Yes, I think it does. So I think we're fine. Come on, it's getting late, Dean. Okay, so I have hands up still, and I'm going to lower them all. And I'm about to call for a vote on the amendment, but Councillor Jansen has his hand up. Yes, sir. How may I help you? Okay, now may I have a motion on the amendment to remove 2.1 from the main motion? Those in opposition to the removal of this? I have the lonely Mayor Martin in opposition. Therefore, the motion now stands move 2.2 to 2.4, even inclusive of both 2.3s. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Those in opposition? Seeing none. That passes. Michael, you want to make the next motion? Taking, of course, in advice, the mayor's good comments.
I moved 2.5 to 2.9.
Okay, and I have you wishing to speak to that. Go ahead then.
Actually, I was just signaling to you I wanted to make that motion. So I'll take my hand down.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. I would like to remove 2.8 and 2.9.
Okay, I'll take that as a motion to amend.
Thank you. And just to motivate, this is a very long-term initiative, and we're trying to deal with short-term COVID actions. So that's my reasoning.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Mr. Borhill, did you want to jump in on that one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that 2.9 is a project that is already in, it's budgeted as per the budget column there, and is part of the strategic plan for the land use bylaw update. So we included it because there were calls from the business community to focus on this and prioritize it. At this point, staff have funding and intention to proceed with the Colway Corners upzoning project within the next several weeks.
So removing it really would have no impact on that.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter. Oh, sorry, Councillor Day, did you want to say more? Well, Councillor Baxter, I'll come back to you, Councillor Day.
Can I move to separate those two?
I was just going to move to drop 2.9 since it's already being done.
And leave 2.8 in?
No, take out 2.8, leave 2.9 in. So my motion was to remove 2.8
Yes.
and 2.9. I've amended that now to say, let's just take out 2.8 since 2.9 is already underway.
Thank you. Okay, I really have to encourage people to drop their hands once they've spoken. I believe Councillor Kobayashi is next.
Thank you very much, Chair Parkinson. Just another question for staff. I thought you were also given direction when they brought up the question about the performing arts building, and we were looking at that other piece of potential Colwood property, which is the park and ride. Now, this is part of the two, the land that's in question under 2.8, is it not? And I thought it was something that we're going to do within the year. That was my understanding. So we're removing something that we've already all agreed and had motions and approvals for. So could you just clarify that for me? Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, 2.8 includes a highest and best use analysis of two sites. So staff had envisioned the two major potential development sites that include the park and ride site as well as the city lands that are owned in the Royal Bay area. We haven't yet budgeted a consultant time to work through the highest and best use analysis of the park and ride site. We've been in discussion with the proponents of that art center project, but at this stage, we would not be looking at having a third party do that work under existing budgets for 2020.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but the city center site is already being discussed under different process, and I have to excuse myself from that process. So could we just leave that site in that process and not have it discussed here? Otherwise, I've got to leave the room.
Well, I think that's the intention of this motion here, is to take 2.8, and therefore there would be no discussion of it. So,
well, if I may, by removing it, you're discussing it. We're discussing it right now. I'm asking that it be dropped totally from the discussion.
I don't see how we do that. It's in the list of what we're talking about. We either talk about it to remove it or we leave it in, which is like talking about it. So
okay, when it's my turn to speak, I will only speak to the other property then.
Thank you. Well, I think it's your turn to speak. Councillor Kobayashi, your hand is up. Did you want to speak again? Let me know. leave it up if you do. Go ahead, Councillor Baxter, you have the floor.
Okay, I agree with making a move on the property on Machosen Road in Royal Bay, but I don't agree that this is good timing. I think that should be left alone for a while, because if I can just talk through this, if we propose or sell it for any commercial development, it's directly competing with the village center in Royal Bay South. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's much better to let everything go to that site that is commercial. So that's dealt with commercial. And I don't think it's a good idea that it be developed for residential purposes until the development gets closer, bringing the internal road network and internal trail network to that site. If we try and develop it now, it's being developed as an island that must enter directly onto the onto Machosen Road, and we would waste space developing a spine road down a narrow property. It'd be a very poor development. So my feeling is just leave that property alone until Royal Bay South has got a lot further.
So the motion we have on the floor is to amend the motion to approve 2.5 to 2.9 by removing 2.8. Councillor Baxter, hopefully you about to lower that hand.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Do I have any in opposition to the motion of removing 2.8? Interestingly, okay, I have Councillor Kobayashi, Mayor Martin, and Councillor Logan in opposition. That fails. The main motion is now to approve 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, and 2.9. Can you lower hands, please? Unless you want to speak on the main motion. Who would like to speak on the main motion? Seeing none, those in opposition to the main motion. Seeing none, that motion passes. Carry on, Michael.
Okay, in order to suck up to the boss, I'd like to propose 3.1. We passed 3.1 to 3.16.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, who would like to discuss that motion? Councillor Baxter, you have the floor.
I'd like to question 3.1, and I'd be interested in staff's response if they want to give one. I don't know why we would want to get involved in exterior renovations during this time. Exterior renovations basically are about improving the value of the property at a time when values are going to be a difficult thing. Would be far better, it seems to me, to increase household prosperity by focusing loans on energy saving. That would actually directly improve the prosperity of people living in those homes. So if I don't get a response from staff, I'm just going to move we take that out.
Hi, Mr.
Please,
Chair.
staff, respond. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Happy to do so. There is a recently announced program through the province to provide up to 0% financing for energy efficiency upgrades, in particular converting fossil fuel-based heating systems to air-to-air heat pumps. So that is something that is happening. The intention behind this one was it would be a stimulus to both the local construction sector, as well as a help to the older neighborhoods in Colwood that are at this stage needing some exterior beautification. We have met with a local credit union, and it seems like this is a feasible initiative if council wanted to see it progressed. And there are also other jurisdictions with very similar projects in the United States and Eastern Canada.
I'd like to speak to that then. I only speak to my personal experience, but my experience has been that in my own household, we have a reduced income as a result of COVID-19, and yet we're proceeding with an exterior renovation because we also have reduced expenses since we don't go anywhere. Because of that, I've been talking to various home renovators, and they've all said they're really, really busy. And sorry, we can't put those windows in for you until August at least. And given that they're so busy, I'm not sure why we would get involved. It seems to be something that's going along very nicely. So I'm going to propose we remove 3.1 anyway.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm going to lower all the hands, and we can talk about Michael's amendment to remove 3.1. Any discussion on the removal of 3.1? Okay, those in opposition to removing 3.1, please raise your hands. We have Mayor Martin and Councillor Logan and myself opposed. Motion fails. So now we're back to the main motion, which is to approve 3.1 to 3.16.
Sorry, you had 3 opposed. That means that the motion carried.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Councillor Day. So the motion, no. Oh.
So the motion passed,
carries.
which means 3.1 is out.
Thank you very much. So now the main motion is 3.2 to 3.16. Glad somebody's awake there, Councillor Day. Discussion on the main motion, Mayor Martin.
No, sorry, I do not. That was bad hands. I'm removing my hand.
Okay, Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a problem with 3.10 and 3.14, and although they're laudable and worthy initiatives, I believe that we very rightly steered clear of delving into what might be perceived as provincial responsibility from the health department. And I think those are encroaching on that in that regard.
Is that a motion?
As my motion is to remove 3.10 and 3.14.
I'm going to lower all hands and look for discussion on the motion to remove 3.10 and 3.14. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in opposition to the motion to remove 3.10 and 3.14 for a couple of reasons. We have had and continue to have significant issues for youth in the West Shore. There are significant, and they have existed for 10 years, numbers of youth without housing. So trying to, I'm not suggesting that this means that we're initiating a program. All that we would be doing is providing links to programs that exist through other agencies, VIHA and CRD. And our local service providers have been compiling lists of youth and family addictions counseling services. So a lot of the work involved in both of these items is really a matter of spreading the word of what is already out there, which all of our youth and family difficulties are often increased by COVID and the limitations that it places on all of us. So the school district has a significant listing. The provincial government has increased the amount of services that are available. So I see both of these items as being promoting work to our community members and advocating for as much access in the West Shore as possible, because we have a large population that is often seen as being served by services that are located far from Colwood. And that has been a major issue identified for several years running. I just think that we're trying to give our community all the information they need to have a happy and successful life. And I don't think these items are initiatives that we're really undertaking ourselves. We're just making sure the information is out there.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
I think it's part of our normal work to lobby for these services and to provide grants and aid to suitable organizations that help with these services. And as Councillor Day said, to spread the word that they exist. Can I ask staff, does any of the work proposed here go beyond what I've just listed?
Through the chair, your conception of these tactics is pretty consistent to what staff foresaw. And if I could just once again point the committee to the budget, it might provide some guidance as to how these different tactics would be dealt with in the budget.
So my further question then is, why do these need to be in here if it's work we do anyway?
Hi, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just start with 3.10. At this point, the work we're doing in this is very temporary in the sense that we have identified information from other levels of government, primarily the province, and then the VIHA and CRD to give individuals directly that may be dealing with homelessness in Colwood. Luckily, there aren't a lot of individuals who've identified that need that, but we are doing that. This would simply be an initiative where we continue doing that and update things as they go forward. The rest of them are really like 3.11. There is no plan at this stage to start those conversations around youth programming. This idea actually came from
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order. We're not discussing 3.11. Inappropriate.
Apologies. I got mixed up.
Hey, it happens to the best of us, Ian.
3.14. It would be specifically directing staff to look at or connect with the service providers and to determine what they would be potentially asking for a greater grant and aid package for 2021.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair Parkinson. I guess I support Councillor Jensen's motion here because I guess this is where I'm getting a bit confused right now. And by the way, we are doing a line by line analysis here.
Yes, we
are. Anyways, it's I'm not saying that any of I agree with all the initiatives from 310 to 316. I don't have any heartache with them. You know, 310 to 314 because we're specifically talking about those two issues. But do they belong here? That gets back to the point Councillor Baxter made. They don't belong here. That's why I'm having all kinds of problems with this document right now. They don't belong here. And another thing, maybe the CEO can just clarify this. If it's already in the budget and it's already immediate or long-term or short-term, why is it even in this document? Because we've just given them the license to go ahead and execute. So why are we discussing these in this particular document? So I'm going to make a further motion after we vote on this motion because you know, in essence, 310 to 316 belong someplace, but they don't belong here. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. The reason that you see an item with a 2020 budget item listed, that's in many instances because we're using this document to help committee and eventually council reprioritize staff's time. And so from the perspective of household prosperity, this section is within the document. And if committee and then eventually council was to affirm either 310 or 314 relative to this discussion, in the instance of 310, that is prioritizing staff time. In the instance of 314, that's allocating our specific COVID response.
Thank you. I believe all the hands I'm seeing are people who've spoken already. I'm going to lower all the hands. Did you put your hand up again, Mr. Earl?
Sorry, I was trying to put it down.
Okay. Let me lower it. Okay, I have a clean screen. I believe we are voting on an amendment from Councillor Jansen to remove 3.10 and 3.14 from the list of projects to be approved. Any further discussion? Those in opposition to removing the items 3.10 and 3.14. I have Mayor Martin and Councillor Day in opposition. Therefore, the motion passes. 3.10 and 3.14 are to be deleted. And the main motion is 3.1 to 3.16 without those two things. I'm lowering all hands. Does anybody want to discuss the main motion? Councillor Kobayashi does. Speak up, please, sir. Unmute
Thank you
yourself.
very much. I want to make propose an amendment to item 3.4 and 3.4 and 3.5. I think they're of immediate importance. We were just talking about that. I think the mayor was just saying that lots of announcements, and there's federal announcements about various infrastructure plans or programs. Well, you know, we're waiting a long time to get some of these things done. And, you know, for item number 3.4, I would tend to think that we want to have these things ready immediately. So we're ready, we're shovel ready, and we're ready to put the applications in. I don't think we should delay it any more, a couple more months. So I just want to make that amendment that it be immediate, that 3.4 be immediate. And 3.5, actually, I was going to suggest it not be long-term, but midterm, mainly because I think a lot of decisions are being made about, you know, potentially a lot of discussions about COVID-19 and the whole fact that, you know, this work from home strategy is being worked on. And I know there was talk about possible renovations to city center. So I think before you start even spending that thing, all that money, I don't know when it was actually programmed to start, but I tend to think that you'd want to get that done in the midterm anyways. So that's, I'm going to make that motion that these priorities be changed from immediate to midterm.
Thank you. Okay, so we have an amendment on the table to change 3.4, the timeline to immediate, and 3.5, the timeline to midterm. Have I got that correct, Doug? Okay. Discussion on the motion, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just want to point out that both of those items are in progress already. So I don't know, I'm not really sure what difference it makes, whether they're medium term or long term. They're both being worked on right now.
Yep, thank you. The difference it makes is we get to move on and not talk about it anymore. Those in opposition to Councillor Kobayashi's motion. Okay, good. Back to the main motion. 3.1 to 3.16 minus 3.10 and 3.14 with minor adjustments to 3.4 and 3.5. Would you like to talk about it, Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, we did actually exclude 3.1 as well.
Thank you very much. So the main motion is 3.2 to 3.16 minus 3.14 and 3.10 with minor changes to the timelines at 3.4 and 3.5. Please don't make me say all that again. I'm lowering all hands. Any discussion? Those in opposition? The motion passes. Carry on, Michael. Oh, you're done.
Well done, council. We got through it all.
Can I just double check with probably Mr. Earl that satisfies the intention of the recommendation here that we had to, that was put in front of us? Or do we need to do part of this 5-part recommendation that was in front of us?
Thank you, Chair. Parkinson staff have all the information that we need to proceed.
Great. All right, moving right along. If you're still awake, Mr. Auger, would you like to speak to us about Meadow Park Green improvements?
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I coming through okay?
Very well.
Excellent. Okay, I'll attempt to share my screen here. Bear with me. Can you see that all right?
Yep. Looks good to me. I think everybody okay? There you go, perfect.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this brief presentation, and I'll keep it brief, is in regards to the Meadow Park Green improvements that fall outside the park's terms of reference and are proposed to be funded from the Community Amenities Reserve. Just for background, I'll start with the location. Meadow Park Green is part of Meadow Park North, which is proposed to be a feature active park in the kind of central location of Royal Bay Latoria North. The black outline outlines Latoria North of the Royal Bay development. If you can see my cursor, this is Latoria Boulevard, and the red arrows pointing to specifically Meadow Park Green.
Perfect.
This next slide is a little more zoomed in version.
Yeah. No,
Sorry, am I coming through okay?
Yeah, now that we got Michael on mute, you're fine.
Okay, perfect. So this next slide, Meadow Park North, is just a zoomed in version showing what's entailed in all of Meadow Park North. What we're here tonight to talk about is Meadow Park Green, as shown here. Meadow Park North does consist of a drainage channel through connecting down further south into Meadow Park South. This next slide is, again, a zoomed in version of Meadow Park Green. As you can see, we'll talk about proposed amenities here in a second with recommendations. Meadow Park Green central to all these residential dwellings. It's surrounded by Trumpeter Street. As you can see here, it consists of a playground area and a featured open space for park users to use as they please. There is again, Meadow Park North. The drainage channel runs along, as my cursor shows. There's a bridge across leading to an asphalt perimeter path that surrounds the entire park itself around the playground. And the proposed amenities, which I'll get to in a second, like I mentioned, include electrical upgrades to allow for 3 nodes of seasonal displays, one being right here, spread around the park, one being further south, and one being further west near the drainage channel. The next proposed amenity is the washroom facility. It would be located right where my cursor shows. That's north in the park to allow easy access, but also clean viewing to the users and the little kids running from the park to use the washroom. The last upgrade, including the electrical amenities, would be allowance for a receptacle with the kiosk to allow for power in the park. Not only for, say, if we decided to go with an event stage, but food truck outlets, as Mr. Pommier mentioned earlier on in the public speaking, for where we would have the food trucks parking. in this location. So I will move to the recommendation. The recommendation is that committee of the whole consider recommending to council that funds be allocated from the community amenity reserve to provide the amenities that fall outside the requirements of the park's terms of reference, specifically for Meadow Park Green, located in Royal Bay North. These are firstly, additional electrical servicing at an estimated total cost of $68,500 to allow for events, lighting, and power supply within the park. Secondly, to provide a fully serviced washroom facility in Meadow Park Green, and there's 3 options here. Option 1 is a single stall site-built washroom at an estimated cost of $40,000, or a dual stall site-built washroom at an estimated cost of $55,000, or what is called a Portland loo at an estimated cost of $180,000 plus installation costs. And lastly, as I didn't mention, as it was not ready in time to discuss the locations of these, would be to supply and install 2 dual head level 2 electrical vehicle charging stations at an estimated cost of $10,300. Myself and other staff are available for questions, and I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Looking for discussion, I guess. Councillor Jansen, you're first on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to get the party started here, I'm gonna go ahead and recommend the following recommendations. Number 1, which is the full electrical upgrade. Number 2B, which is the dual stall site-built washroom. And number 3. So that's 1, 2B, and 3.
Okay, I'm going to assume that all the hands up are discussion on that motion. So,
and I'd like to motivate when you're ready.
I guess we're ready. Fire at it.
Thanks, Stuart. I think the electrical is a no-brainer. We intend to use this space publicly in events, and boy, that's that's forward thinking rather than the typical having to hire a big generator trailer to power everything up. So I greatly look forward to attending some theater event in the park down there. As far as the washroom facility goes, this Portland thing, this is not the right place for that. That belongs in a downtown urban environment. It looks very austere. It reminds me of a prison washroom. Now, I far prefer and think that we can probably deliver something far more aesthetically appealing for this gem of a facility if we use the current contractor. That way, then we can certainly have matching exteriors, matching style or finish, that kind of idea. And I do think we need 2 stalls rather than 1. If you get a couple of mothers changing their children at the same time, they'll be quickly used up. And the electrical vehicle stations, I think, is a no-brainer. That's all I got.
Thank you, Councillor Jansen. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask staff about the Portland loo and why it's like 3 times the cost and it doesn't seem to have more capacity. I'm just wondering why was that suggested? Maybe I need to know more about Portland loos.
If I may answer that through the chair, the Portland loo is and I had to smirk at Councillor Jensen's comments. They have been installed in and around the area, and I have to say that it's probably my desire to want to see them costed out and brought about. What they are is a relatively industrial, and Councillor Jensen had it right. This is a very urbanized sort of look, but they're relatively industrial. They're very difficult to damage. The graffiti is got a coating on them for graffiti, and they've just been found to stand the test of time. I think now we know the cost, we can understand why they stand the test of time. They'd better for that cost. And I certainly accept the proposal that's being brought forward, but I felt that I should answer that question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I certainly support the 2 stalls. I think it's really important when you're taking families to the park. Being able to access a washroom is vital, whether you're pregnant or you've got babies or you've just already had too many babies. It really helps when you're going out in the community to enjoy it. And having a couple makes a huge difference because there's always somebody putting something in there that's going to gum one up. So I think 2 is a reasonable amount.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Baxter. Unmute. Michael, unmute yourself. Start over.
I speak in support of this motion, as well as young mothers with, or mothers with young babies. I think all of us who are over 60 and have a prostate gland have to support this as well.
Yeah, that's enough from you. Councillor Logan, the young guy.
I don't know how you follow that one, but but I think this is a perfect use for those amenity fundings. I do take the point that I hope we're not going to build a facility out of cinder block, and that it'll have good exterior finishes and that sort of thing, so it blends in. It's quality. We did get some really good comments actually from parents who had requested to have kind of child-friendly sinks around the park. Something that I never really would think of now that my kids are older, but I think that that's something that we should consider. So I appreciated that actually. The only thing that makes me nervous is the vehicle charging stations, and I say that because they're located right smack dab in the middle of a residential community. And it's awfully tempting for people that live across the street to park their car there and charge it for free. It happens at City Hall, and it bugs me. It's a small thing, but it bugs me. And it really takes away from the true intention of those that are visiting the park. That would like to charge. So I just raised that as a flag, but and a bit of a concern, but otherwise I'm supportive.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm of the same opinion as Councillor Logan. That was the point I was going to make. I'm of the same ilk because you sure get a lot of complaints about people using City Hall, and just drive by there at 1 o'clock in the morning and there's cars parked there. So, the very fact that you have this in a neighborhood area, I was going to ask the question, who's paying for it? I'm tired of subsidizing other people. That's my opinion. And, how about putting one up my way here, up on Besanton? I'd be quite happy. And maybe, anyways, so I support all the recommendations, with the exception of point number 3, because if you make them the ones where you pay, you throw your credit card in, then I would be totally supportive of this, but I don't support the item 3 on the recommendation.
Yeah, your chairness, I'm happy to sever 1 and 2, and we can discuss 3 separately if you want.
That sounds like there might be some merit to that.
So that would be, I'll amend my motion to 1 and 2B only, and we'll come back to the other.
Then I'm going to lower everybody's hands and see who wants to talk about the new revised motion from Councillor Jansen, which is 1 and 2B. Okay, then I'm going to ask for those in opposition to that motion. Seeing none, I'm going to say that motion passes. Now I'm looking for if anybody wants to do anything with number 3, supply and install 2 dual head level 2 electrical vehicle charging stations at an estimated cost of $10,300. Councillor Baxter, you have the floor. And of course, you're mute.
Yes. Now that I'm unmuted, are you keeping score, Dean? I propose adding option 3, but with an addition that says they only be installed if they can be made to collect money for the charging with a credit card.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Day. Oh, wait a minute.
Thank you. Michael has accomplished
Um,
my goal.
Thank you. And do I have to deal with that as an amendment to the motion? I probably do, eh? Okay.
No, point of order, Mr. Chair.
separate-
There was no motion to be amended. The motion you had before was 1 and 2B,
Right.
and that had already been dealt with. This is a fresh motion, which is longer than option 3 as
Okay.
stated. But it's
So you've
fresh.
made, sorry about that. So I'm clear. You've made the motion, which is number 3, with the provisor that they only be installed if there can be a payment system for the electricity used. Okay, then let's talk about that. Mayor Martin.
Well, I thank you. I seriously thought I was going to be supporting a Michael motion, but I'm not. And I'll tell you why. I will be voting against this, and if this motion fails, I will be making the motion that we just go back and actually have the 10,300 for the chargers. And I'll say it this way: this is a fundamental decision that we should be making as a council if we're going to start charging. If we're going to start charging, then we should look at doing it regional wide. I don't want to nitpick and go, that specific location only gets charging stations once we start charging for them. I think we provide that service for the city. We should be environmentally focused. And if at a decision point that we say we are now going to start charging for electricity for that, and I believe that is at someday coming, that should be a decision of council and not in this specific motion. And I'm afraid that this specific motion is putting us down a path that I don't feel comfortable with. So that's the reason I won't be supporting this specific, but I will be supporting passionately that we need to be putting charging into this location.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Molnar to chip in here.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I agree that the report has been silent. However, the majority of charging stations that we would be looked to be tabling presently or into the future would be pay. And so if you look at our GLOW system, which we've used over the last year or so, I'm sorry for being off on the date there, it is a pay-for-use system. And they can be applied at the city hall here, which they are. They can be applied down at the Hydro Park and Ride, and as well as we're looking to upgrade the ones at Wandafuca with a pay-for-use system. So perhaps reinforcement of that is all that's looking here, or clarity in this report, or exclusion for this factor here, if I could just offer that suggestion.
Thank you very much. Okay, everybody who's spoken, lower your hands. Councillor Kobayashi, I believe you're next.
Thank you very much. So just a clarification of what you just said to, you're saying that they're all going to a metered system then, Brent?
Sorry for the delay, just, yeah. Even as we look to replace with some of our old free chargers, the GLOW system has a good user interface, a good reporting and good charge payback to the provider the installer of the system. It's nominal. I mean, in the percentage, it's not 1 for 1, but there is a recovery process applied to it, and then the user pays for their own electricity consumption by way of their credit card.
Okay, I'm really happy to hear that. And it's not to punish those with electric cars either, but the principle of this is, okay, using the mayor's logic here, then if you're going to give it, if you're going to provide it there, then I want it up where I live and I want the same service for free. I mean, that's the counter argument you're going to see on this. So no matter which way we go on this, there's going to be unhappy campers. Thanks.
Councillor Baxter.
I want to support the mayor's support for payment at chargers because as a long-time electric vehicle driver, there's nothing more annoying than to be really desperately in need of a charge and there's somebody using the charger who doesn't need to, or they're running a business. So for instance, there's a courier locally who uses chargers and was having a great time up in Duncan when their fast charger was free. All charging should now be pay charging, and this is just moving in that direction because it stops people who don't actually need it just using it because why not? I got a little spare room in my battery.
Thank you. Mayor Martin.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying we should not be moving towards mechanisms that will allow us to collect. If that's the intention of what council is actually saying, that we should be using, for example, a glow, because in the future we should be charging for that, I'm 100% supportive of that. If we're saying, though, we're not putting those charging stations in until this council makes a philosophical decision that we are now charging for electric charging stations, I'm not supportive of that, because that's not what tonight's intention is. If that's the will of council, I say, let's put that on an agenda item and let's talk about that, but that shouldn't be tonight's decision. And that's just where I'm at with that. So I'm saying, let's put the charging stations in. Let's make sure that we have a mechanism to collect payment in the future. And we can, and I'll bring back a different decision mechanism about when do we start charging for that. But we shouldn't not do it, is what I'm saying. And I'm done. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jansen. Lower hands, people.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if somebody can drop off 5 gallons of gas at my door, please. Sorry, I digress, but this is all great stuff. I'd hate to see us have to put in 2 sets of chargers there. Let's just do it once and do it right. And it sounds like our engineering staff have the technology they want to use. So let's just progress with that. And no, you know, gone are the days of the freebies. I think here it's user pay. We all pay our way, and it's a minor cost recovery. I don't think anyone's getting rich off of charging stations here. So, and I think the intention here is for people arriving at the park in their electric vehicles.
Yes.
That's the intention.
Yes.
So maybe there's other technology that turns it off at night. You know, so it's there for the day and then it's off at night if it ends up being, you know, free for users. The intention is for the people that are park users, not area residents. But it is a deeper, longer discussion, and I take your point, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm just asking if we could read back the motion because it's been so much discussion. I'm not sure what's on the table anymore.
Yeah, I'll get there. So just, okay, it's late. I'm grumpy. I'm going to chip in here and tell you what a fascinating discussion there has been about the charge or no charge for electric stations, without a word about, are people going to go and plug their cars in there, whether they pay or not, and take away parking stalls for people who might come to the park. Anyhow, let's move on. The motion, as I understand it, is to supply and install 2 dual head level 2 electrical vehicle charging stations at an estimated cost of $10,300, providing a mechanism for charging back electricity can be incorporated. I'm going to lower all hands, and anybody who wants one more kick at the cat can raise their hand. Thank you. Okay, all in opposition to the motion. Seeing none, the motion passes. All right, next meeting of the Committee of the Whole is scheduled to be held Monday, August 24th, 2020. Can I get a movement to adjourn? Lots of them. Councillor Jansen, you win the race. We're adjourned. Good night, all.
Thank you, Stuart.
Well done. Chair
Well
Park.
done. That was a toughie
marathon.
for your first.
Thanks. Thanks. Appreciate the feedback. I'm not sure it's warranted, but I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Good night, everybody.